Hello everyone, this is Professor Kalabata, and these are some writing suggestions for your last essay assignment. So I'll read through a little bit of this and then I'll stop and talk about things along the way. So in the beginning here, I just wanted to go over a couple of last thoughts about argument. And I mentioned up here that we've talked about argument in a couple of different ways throughout the semester. So uh, I put links here to our other Canvas pages. There was the first review page where I gave information about some things that I cover in English 1A. There was the Tolman model of argument, and then there was material on deductive and inductive reasoning, and this form of argument called the syllogism that we'll talk about again in a second. And let me just look at those. I already opened up these three links. So first of all, there was the essay review of material that I cover from English 1A. You did not have to be in my class in English 1A, but I just like to have a quick review of some basic material that everybody should know from English 1A before we go into English 1B. But so here's the review page for English 1A. And when I was talking about support, I wanted to mention something that I talk about in English 1A a lot is something that I like to call the support sandwich. And so here it is right there. Those three elements. So try to give a claim. What are you trying to defend in this particular section of your essay? Try to have at least one piece of support. It can be a personal experience or a personal observation if it's something that didn't actually happen to you. Maybe you observed it around you. Or it can be a quote, or it can be numbers, it can be statistics from things that you looked up in your research. So you want to have a claim, some sort of opinion that you're developing in this section of your essay, and then you want to have at least one piece of support. And then I have different names for this last piece, the interpretation or the commentary. This is where you're talking about the support that you just gave us. What does it mean? Why is it important? And how and why does it back up or illustrate the claim that you talked about at the beginning of the section? And so I like to call it a support sandwich, remember, because it's like you are sandwiching either examples or outside material. Sometimes I call this the meat and cheese, the stuff in the middle, and then you've got your idea in the very beginning of the section, and then you also have more of your ideas in the last part of the section. So this is the top piece of bread, your claim, your opinion at the beginning, and then you give some example or some quote or statistics in the middle. That's your meat and cheese. And then the last section is the interpretation or the commentary where you talk about, this is more opinion basically. I mean, it's opinion about what you think about the support. What does the personal experience mean? What is the lesson? Or what is the author saying in the quote? Why is it an important quote? And how and why does it back up the claim that you were talking about at the beginning of the section? So we've got a top piece of bread and a bottom piece of bread, and then the meat and cheese in the middle. All right. Now, there was also, so there was the 1A review material, and then there was the Tolman form of argument. So here was the lesson notes about the Tolman model of argument that we covered in one of our previous essays. And the Tolman model of argument uses this T chart. On the left here we have the claim. On the right we have support. And on the bottom we have the warrant, what the Tolman model of argument calls the warrant. We could also call it the assumption. Remember, we talked about the word assumption. The word assume or an assumption means that something you take for granted. It's something that you accept as a given before you begin the argument. So, and remember, the assumption is what builds the bridge between the claim and the support. And so there was this backscatter technology argument that I wanted to use to illustrate this point. So remember, the backscatter argument was that we should use this X-ray technology in all airports. That's the claim. And the support is that when we use backscatter technology, the the level of criminal activity goes down. So statistics. The opposing argument would be we should not use backscatter technology in airports, and the support is personal experience or personal observations that make appeals to what is appropriate or what is right, what is acceptable, appeals to privacy. And down here, remember the warrant, the assumption was about larger principles. Either security is more important than privacy, or privacy is more important than security. And so the different assumptions that people were arguing about would either form a bridge or break the bridge between the claim and the support. Because remember, for instance, if somebody says we should use backscatter technology because look at the statistics, the support shows that when we increase backscatter technology, the level of criminal activity goes down. Well, there's a nice bridge between the claim and the support if we start off with an assumption that security is more important than privacy. But if we have the opposite assumption that privacy is more important than security, well, then those statistics that show that the criminal activity goes down when the backscatter technology, the usage of that technology goes up. If we start off with the assumption that privacy is more important than security, then those statistics don't matter. And so the bridge has been broken between the claim and the support. So that the Tolman model of argument does a good job at that, at showing how what they call the warrant, or we could also use the word assumption, it forms a nice bridge between the claim and the support. That's a quick review. And then the last element that I have here, the syllogisms and the deductive reasoning. And let me just scroll down here. When we were talking about deductive reasoning, remember the syllogism has three elements: the major premise, the minor premise, and the conclusion. So, and we did some visual diagramming here. All humans are mortal, major premise. Socrates is human, the minor premise. Therefore, Socrates is mortal, the conclusion. So you notice there's a pattern here with the English 1A review. The thing that I like to call the support sandwich has three elements: claim, support, and interpretation or commentary or connections. Maybe there are different words we can use to describe what you're doing in this last piece of bread, but it's talking about the support, why it's important, and how and why it backs up or illustrates the claim. So there's the three elements there. In the Tolman model of argument, claim, support, warrant, there's three elements there. And then there's the deductive line of reasoning, and sometimes people do these syllogisms a lot. If you take a philosophy class, you'll probably play around with these syllogisms a lot: major premise, minor premise, and conclusion. And we touched on this a little bit before when we were talking about inductive and deductive reasoning. And we could see that we were starting to talk about how the three different elements of these different models of argument all correlate to each other. And we already mentioned that before, but I wanted to go into it a little bit more detail here at the end. So you see this time I've got a circle. I guess I'll talk about why I wanted to use a circle, but here's the three elements again. So it's just the three same elements, the three elements you see popping up again and again. It's the same thing, but just using different words to describe it, and they're also arranged visually in different ways in front of you. So we've got the claim, we've got the support, we've got the assumption, or we could, let's see, on the inductive and deductive reasoning Canvas page, I tried to show how the syllogism with the major premise, minor premise, and conclusion correlates to the Tolman model of argument. So in the Tolman model of argument, here's the claim over here on the left, and then here's the support over here on the right, and then here's the warrant or the assumption down here at the bottom. And these three elements correlate to the major premise. Down here would be the warrant. The minor premise would be the support. and then the conclusion of the syllogism would be the claim. So Tolman, the person who created this T-chart, he made a T-chart because, first of all, he wanted it to seem like there's movement from the claim to support, that you're starting off with your claim and you're moving to your support. And along the way, you have to be aware that there are assumptions that may be verbalized or maybe not, but there's always an assumption there. This is the tricky part, to understand what the assumptions are that are holding up this bridge between your claims and your support. These syllogisms, on the other hand, and if you take a history class or a philosophy class, you'll learn the history of that. People in ancient Greece 2,500 years ago, they loved those syllogisms. And there are reasons why, but I won't take up your time going into why they made these syllogisms in ancient Greece. But you can see the movement of the syllogism goes in the other direction, whereas Tolman starts over here with the claim and moves to the support and sometimes verbalizes the warrant or the assumption. Frankly, in my opinion, I think your argument would be stronger if you try to be aware of what the assumptions are that your argument is based on, and that you can verbalize them. And that also, if you can identify the assumptions that other people have in their arguments and call them out about whether or not their assumptions are good or not. The assumption is basically another claim. It's a broader claim about things in general that forms the foundation of your of the claim that you're arguing right now. So it's a deeper underlying claim that forms the foundation of the surface claim, the thing people often are arguing up here on the surface without really being aware of the assumptions that their argument is based on. But anyways, Tolman went from claim to support, and then wanted us to try to work to be aware of what the assumptions are and how the assumption builds a bridge between the claim and the support. In ancient Greece, with these syllogisms, they started off with what they called a major premise, which would be the warrant in the Tolman model of argument, and then minor premise, which would be support, and then their conclusion would be the claim. So it's just different people from different time periods and different countries. They are all identifying the same three elements of argument, and they're just arranging them in different ways. One person said, Mr. Tolman, you can read more about that guy if you're interested, but whatever, I'm not going to waste your time talking about who this person was, but his name was Tolman. He wanted to start with the claim and go to support, and then try to be aware of the assumption, which may or may not be verbalized. In ancient Greece, they made a point of always wanting to verbalize all three of these things, but they started off with the warrant and then went to support and then ended with the claim or the opinion. And remember that the different order that we move in is either deductive, is either deductive or inductive. Remember this circular graphic that I made, where if you start off with observations or personal experience, or we might say support, and then you try to come to some sort of conclusion about it, like a scientific theory, or it might be a claim, an opinion. This would be Tolman's claim. Then you're doing inductive reasoning. You're making observations and trying to come to conclusions about it. So going the other way, where you have a claim and then you're trying to state some sort of personal experience or observation to back up the claim, that is deductive reasoning, going in that way. So we want to be aware of when we're moving one way or the other. These diagrams kind of tell us that argument should move in one way or another, and it's just because different people have different opinions about which one you should use first. Tolman liked giving us the claim first, or maybe the scientific theory first, depending on what you're arguing about. Are you arguing about morality? Are you arguing about science? Whatever. If it's science, then this is the scientific theory, and here's the observations you made by looking into the microscope. That would be the support. But it can go the other way. You could start by telling us what your observations are, and then end by telling us what the conclusions are. that you derived from your observations. So you could go one way or the other, and you can see how different people have different ways of doing that. I'll go back to the English 1A review page that I have here, and you can see my sandwich, right? My silly little sandwich, the silly word, the silly name that I have for the thing that I made up. But it's basically the same three elements. And I guess I'm heavily influenced by Tolman, so you can see it kind of follows the Tolman model. So you start with claim and then give your support, and then the bottom piece of bread would be something that Tolman would probably say is the assumption, or it's the, remember, Tolman was always talking about how there's some idea that is building a bridge between the claim and the support. And so in English 1A, I try to tell people that this bottom piece of bread, the last thing you talk about before moving on to the next section, you want it to be an explanation for how and why the support backs up or supports the claim. So what is the connection between these two things, right? In the last thing that you talk about, the piece of bread before you move on to the next section, it should be an explanation for why the claim and the support are connected. So there's my support sandwich, the three elements. There's Tolman and his three elements, and then there's the syllogism from ancient Greece. Where is it? The syllogism, major premise, minor premise, conclusion. It's the same three elements, but they're just arranged in different orders, and they use different words to label them. So, all right, so here we are at the end, and I wanted to put these three things on the edge of a circle, and I thought the circle might communicate movement, like you can move the circle around and you can arrange these things in any way you want. I have a paragraph down here at the bottom. I did put all these different elements, all these discussions about argument are really just the same three elements given to us in different orders and in different forms. So maybe you might be asking me right now, why did you give us the same information several times but in different forms? Isn't that a waste of time? I guess maybe, but I think there are a couple reasons why it's helpful to do this. And two big reasons, I put two big reasons for doing that. Getting the same information but in different ways can be helpful for two reasons. One, processing the same information in different ways helps us understand the information better. You'll probably learn that more as time goes on, that you can look at the same information from different angles. And each time you look at it from a different angle, you kind of learn something new about that information. And the second reason is that processing the information in different ways helps us understand how the different pieces can fit together in different combinations. And that's an important one too, because remember, I talked about how Tolman, who is from the modern era, and the people in ancient Greece, who are from 2,500 years ago, they identified the same three elements of argument, but they just arranged them in different ways, and they used different words to describe them. And so the lesson there is that there isn't necessarily a rigid way to do this. You don't necessarily have to start one place and end in another place. There isn't one right or wrong way to do it. And so you want to be aware of that. You want to be aware that you can arrange things in different pieces. You're free to arrange things in different pieces. And you don't want, there's a car going by. Okay, sorry. What you don't want to do is you don't want to look for patterns to follow. You don't want to look at writing or forming arguments as just simply a game of memorizing patterns, which in the very beginning, it's kind of convenient. You know, that's why in the very beginning, I like giving people this support sandwich, because when people are just starting out, it's nice to have a structure. It's nice to have people that know more about the subject to give you a structure to follow. But as you get better and better at something, what usually happens is you need to rely on the structure less and less, and you're able to fool around with the structure more and more as you get better and better at it. And so there's these three elements, and there are different ways of combining them. And I think that you should try to experiment with different ways of combining them. You know, you might talk about the assumption first, and then and then go into the claim and the support. Or you could give the support first, an observation, and tell us what conclusion you came to by looking at that observation. So you might talk about the claim second. And then the third thing you might do is talk about the assumption that connects the claim and the support. So fool around with that. As you get better and better at forming arguments of your own, what you want to do is you want to be aware of the three elements and how they work together, and how you can arrange them in different orders, and the different ways of arranging these three elements demonstrate different strategies. So, as you get better and better, there will be times when you want to do inductive or deductive reasoning. Do you want to start off telling us about your observations and move to your claims or your conclusions? Or do you want to start off with the claim and then move to your observations that supported it? So the better you get at argument, the better you will get at understanding the different strategies and why you should order things one way or the other. But I think that that's the point. The point is you want to understand the three elements and how there are different ways of arranging them. And you don't want to look at writing like it's just patterns to memorize. Okay? But I understand over time that might be difficult to do in the beginning, but over time, if you read a lot and you try talking with people or writing things, you'll get better and better at arguing. And becoming better at argument means observing things and seeing lots of things, and then thinking about how the different elements of your argument can be arranged in different ways to accomplish different things. So I'm sorry if I talked about that a little bit too long. But anyways, a few suggestions to help you develop ideas for Essay 4. So, okay. Essay 4 requires you to analyze your own writing. I suggest you do this exercise on scratch paper. So first of all, and I'll talk a little bit about how this piggybacks off of the first section here. So first, get a piece of scratch paper and spend some time, I don't know, 10 minutes, 30 minutes. Maybe you want to come back to it once or twice. Sometimes people like to write down some ideas for 10 minutes and then leave it alone for an hour and come back and write for another 10 minutes. And sometimes they develop more ideas that way, but okay. You want to get a piece of scratch paper and write down all your thoughts about your own writing. Now remember, here's a link for Essay 4. Let's look at Essay 4 really quick. Essay 4 is requiring you to analyze the previous essays you wrote in this class and to tell us how you improved as a writer, what you still need to work on. So it requires you to analyze your own writing. Some ideas to get you started. Let's see, if you're going to tell somebody, like you're telling somebody the story of your writing development in English 1B, what would you say? What are your strengths? What are you doing well? What do you need to work on? What sorts of things have you improved on? What sorts of skills or knowledge that you're not clear about yet? So look at this paragraph of suggestions and then get your scratch paper and just write down on a piece of scratch paper as many things you can think of. And remember, I kind of already had you start doing this on our module 4, the comprehension questions on the discussion board for module 4. So just take some time and write down as many things you can think of in your writing and try to follow the suggestions that I gave you on the Essay 4 assignment page. And then after you do that, the second thing, get a piece of paper and maybe just divide it in half. You get 2 columns. Or just draw a line down the middle and divide the paper in half. You might also do it on a computer screen like I did here. I just created a table with 2 sides to the table. So you can do it on a computer screen as well. Some people like doing stuff on scratch paper. Some people like using Microsoft Word. I guess I will tell you I'm not going to collect this from you, so I'm not requiring you to do this and I'm not going to grade you on it, but I do think it would be a helpful thing for you to do. So first, put a bunch of your thoughts on scratch paper using the suggestions from the Essay 4 assignment sheet on our Canvas page as a guide. And then the second thing is get a second piece of paper and divide it into 2 columns. In the left column, right here, just make like a grocery list of all the things that you wrote down on the first piece of scratch paper. So just make a grocery list of all the things that you thought about when you were trying to describe your own writing. And then And then in the right column, after you finish the left column, go back and look at the rough draft discussion boards for essay 1, 2, and 3, and also look back at the comments that I typed about your essay about your essays when I graded them. And make a grocery list of the types of things that other people wrote about your essay. What did the other students say about your rough drafts? And what types of things did I say about your final drafts? So you see what we're doing here. In the left column, you want to have a grocery list of the types of things that you think about your own writing. And in the right column, you want to have a grocery list of the types of things that other people thought about your writing. And then after you finish that, then sit back and take a look at it. Right? Once you finish in these filling in the two columns, take some time to look at what you have and what do you see. And so a couple of questions to ask yourself. I mean, the first one, maybe the simplest question to ask is, are they similar or are they different? What does that mean? If you see a lot of the same stuff in the two columns, what does that mean? If you see a lot of different stuff between the two columns, what does that mean? Maybe if the two columns are similar, maybe that means that you are accurately evaluating your own writing. Maybe if they're different, maybe you're not accurately evaluating your own writing. What does it mean if other people are seeing something different in your writing compared to what you're seeing? Are you overconfident? Or maybe are you going in the other direction? Are you being too hard on yourself? Or maybe it's just that you have a couple of things to work on that other people noticed, but you did not notice yourself. So make some comments. I would say probably at the bottom of the scratch paper, below these two columns, or maybe flip the piece of scratch paper over and write some comments to yourself on the other side of this piece of paper. But somewhere you want to write down observations. So you want to make a list of the thoughts you had about your writing in the left column. Make a list of the ideas that other people had about your writing in the right column, and then sit down and make observations and write down your observations. This is inductive reasoning, right? We're making observations. The left column and the right column are your observations, and then you want to derive conclusions. So write down some conclusions for yourself. What are the lessons that you see when you look at these two columns? That's the first thing you want to do. Try to make draw conclusions and lessons from this. The second thing you want to do is after filling in the two columns and then trying to draw some conclusions from it, I think that this exercise will also help you. What did I say here? It'll also help you structure the ideas in the body of your essay. So there's different ways to structure the ideas for this essay. And remember, I talked before in the section above about how there isn't necessarily one way to structure ideas. You do want to have all the elements there, but you can structure them in different ways. And so you want to get into the habit of looking at writing as a creative process. And so it's writing is not, there aren't rigid rules like maybe in the mathematical sciences or like in physics where you can't break the laws of physics. Writing is more of an art form. It's more like painting, okay? But there are certain elements that have to be there, and there are certain techniques that you have to learn about. So in the same way that when you take an art class and you learn how to paint, you're going to learn different techniques of painting. So you can't just get up there and just throw a bunch of stuff. It's not finger painting on a canvas. You do have to learn technique. So, but there are different ways of doing it. And the better you get at it, the more creative you can be at it, and the more effective your different combinations are going to be. So I put a couple of suggestions here. Like for instance, you could structure your ideas in such a way so that maybe you're talking about one essay assignment per section. So you have an introductory paragraph, and you give us a thesis statement, and then in the first body paragraph in the body of your essay, maybe you tell us what your experience was like writing essay 1. And then in the next section, you tell us what your experience was like with essay 2, and what did you learn from essay 1, and how was essay 2 different than essay 1. So you see, you can progress like that through the essay, where your fourth essay assignment is basically like you're telling us a narrative, like you're telling us a story about what your experience was like becoming a better writer or learning more things about writing and argument in English 1B. So maybe it could be a narrative like that, where each section talks about what your experience was like in each essay assignment and how your experiences were building or changing over time. Another way to do it, maybe you could compare and contrast. So you've got all of your ideas in this left column and all the other people's ideas in the right column. Maybe you could write a compare and contrast essay about what you thought of your own writing versus what other people thought of your writing and what lessons you get from that. Another way of doing it might be maybe looking and comparing at the left and the right column could help you understand what types of things you need to work on and what types of things you're doing well on. So like for instance, you could structure your essay where each different section of your essay focuses on a different topic. Like for instance, one section focuses on thesis statements. How did you work on thesis statements? How did you improve? What do you still need to work on? And then maybe in the next section of your essay, you could talk about your use of support. What was it like doing research? What did you learn about doing research? Or was learning about research in this class, was it a review? Did you already learn a lot of this stuff, maybe in high school? Are you more effective now at integrating supports, different types of support like quotes and personal experience? And then maybe in the next section, you could talk about your conclusion paragraphs, right? Maybe you're better at writing conclusion paragraphs a certain way or whatever. So you see that there's different ways you could structure the information in your essay. But I would say that something you want to do is, I think I said right here at the very end, make sure that you have a plan. Don't just throw stuff together, but get some scratch paper, structure your ideas, try to figure out, get all the information in front of you. And I think the left column and the right column exercise I put here will probably help you do that. And then use this scratch paper to make a plan for yourself. And be aware of the type of structure you're using to build the ideas in the body of your essay. And like always, I know this is some people said this is kind of a weird assignment because you're analyzing your own writing. But try to think of it like that. Try to think of it like if you're having a conversation with somebody, what would you tell them about your own writing? And it is kind of like telling a story. What is the story of your writing development in English 1B? And if you're going to tell somebody that story, how would you structure your thoughts? And just like the other essays, let me go back to the English 1A. I don't know if you can hear my kids screaming in the background. Sorry. But English 1A, the English 1A review page, remember, we have an introductory paragraph. You want to have a thesis statement. You have a series of body paragraphs, and then you have a conclusion. Try to do the same thing for this essay assignment. So think of it like any other essay, but instead of analyzing other material, you're analyzing your own writing. And so try to spend some time on the thesis sentence. I think that's also another reason why this left column, right column exercise might help you, because you want to try to sum up a main idea. When you look at these two columns together, what is the big lesson? What is the big idea that pops out? And maybe spend some time on scratch paper. Again, do it on scratch paper and try to get one sentence that sums up a main idea about what you learned or what the journey was like or what the lesson was, or maybe something about the future. What are you going to work on in the future? But spend some time and try to figure out, get an introductory paragraph and try to have that tells us about some general information about what you're going to talk about with your writing experience in English 1B, and then try to have in your introductory paragraph a strong thesis sentence that sums up the main idea of what you learned in English 1B, or what the larger lesson was, or what your prediction for the future, or what you need to work on, or you figure out what you want your main idea to be, and then plan out the structure and the body of the essay. Okay, and make sure you have a plan. Don't just randomly have one paragraph about this, another paragraph about that. Try to have a plan. And remember, in each section, you want to use support. And this time around, the support is your own experiences. Talk about your own experience in 1B and also give us quotes from your previous essays to illustrate some of your points. Okay? And so that's about it. So again, I'll be in office hours this next week, and if you have any questions, call or email me.